part 2 of my presentation today. And I'm going to begin with bringing the light of Christ into public education. And if you are going to commit to this area, then the bulk of what you're going to be doing is actually political activism. Now, you may prefer to just call it activism, dropping the political prefix. Some of us feel uncomfortable about anything political. But at the end of the day, it's political activism, and I'll tell you why. It's political because it will be your intent to advance the beliefs and values of Christians. That's your intent. And you're going to be doing it in a public area of education. So it's political because you're seeking a redistribution of power. You're looking for a redistribution of priorities within the education system so that the ideas of your community, Christians, are respected and not rejected in that public space. So that's really why we call it political activism. And I hope I made it clear in my initial message to the larger gathering that Christian values are now openly, and I would say even with hostility, opposed in our public education system. We've got Christian employees and Christian students who are openly discriminated against. So this is a time when we really do need to step up. We need to be reminded that Christ has asked us. He says, when Christ was asked, how do you pray? He says, you pray that God's will be done on earth. And how does that happen? Sometimes it's got to happen politically. We really do have to change the laws of the land. Now, I know that many Christian leaders, and you are Christian leaders, the people in this room, you command a certain amount of respect, but also troops. You are the commander of different troops. And so I'm appealing to you to get involved in this area, but you might be nervous because often pastors, church leaders get nervous around political activity. And one of the main hesitations is we know that under the laws of Canada, if you become political, you can lose your charitable status, right? And so what I want to tell you today is that there are laws, but they're not as bad as what you think. So part of what I want to describe today, I've done, and maybe you've done this homework already, but I hope I've done the homework for you. I've gone through the legislation related to what churches and pastors and church leaders can and can't do, and I want to show you that you actually have some latitude. And so we'll look at that in terms of the political activism you can do. So before I give you specific instructions on how to become active, I want to show why it's legal. So let's go first to, this is the thou shalt not. This is the thou shalt not slide. Here's what you cannot do. You cannot, as a pastor or as a church, you cannot endorse or denounce candidates or parties. So keep that in mind. So you can't say, oh, I really dislike Justin Trudeau. You can't do that from the pulpit. You can't do it on your church website. You can't say the liberals make me crazy. You can't do that. You can't do that. So we're clear. So that's something you can't do. But a church can endorse or denounce government laws and policy. A lot of people don't know this. That you are actually free in your sermons, in your church website, in your church bulletins, in public meetings. You are free to denounce any decision of government, any policy of government, any law. You are not in breach of the tax code when you do this. A lot of pastors and church leaders don't know. You can think of it like this. I'll give it to you in ways that perhaps will stick a little bit more. You can't attack the people, whether it's the personal politician or the party, but you can attack the ideas. Right. So that gives us a little bit of wiggle room. Because I'm going to be saying to you, you need to speak up about these things. You're going to say, well, how? You do it by talking about the ideas. There are a couple other caveats. When you are attacking the ideas, and you're all men and women of God, but you have to realize you have to be truthful. So there are certain caveats, right? If you're going to be speaking out against a piece of legislation, you've got to tell the truth about it. Also, you can't violate hate speech laws. I'm sure that that's probably going to be something that is easy for you to avoid, except they keep changing the goalposts on what hate speech is. But for now it is the case. If it's truthful and you're not violating hate speech laws, those are really your two caveats. Other than that, you can criticize away. All right. I want you to know that you can protest. That you as a pastor, you as a church leader can lead a protest. You can gather your church in a protest, in a march. Now I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's talk about protests. Some thoughts on protests. The reason I'm focusing on protests is if you can do a protest, you can do a meeting within your church. You can do something a little bit less dramatic. So let me focus on protest. I'll give you a personal anecdote. Last fall, I was part of a massive protest over gender ideology in our schools. Now, I was helping with the local protest, the rally. It was at City Hall in Kitchener. I'm from Cambridge myself, but we all agreed that we would do it in Kitchener. It was part of the local million-person march. You may be familiar with that. So I'm one of the local organizers, and there were religious leaders there. But here's something to know, and it's sad. There were religious leaders organizing this protest, and none of them were Christian. Not a single pastor from our area. There were pastors involved in other areas, but it was mostly Muslim religious leaders. And God bless them. They were bold in their assertions. But the Christian pastors could have shown up. Because as I've just told you, when you're protesting government laws or policies or decisions, including educational policies, you can. And you should. Because it's legal. So there I am, the nominal Christian. I don't have a church, right? My ministry is an apologetics ministry. And I was looking for my Christian brothers and sisters. And I was wondering, what would have happened if a pastor had actually activated their whole church and said, we need to stand up, just like the Muslim religious leaders had done with their mosques. They brought out their entire congregations. And it was mostly word of mouth among the Christian community. So another thing I'll say about these protests is they aren't really meant to change the mind of government. Just so you know. You say, oh, why should we do a protest? It's not going to change the mind of government. You're right, it won't. It is very unlikely that a protest will change the mind of government. But it still will do something, and something important. So let me go through the purposes of a protest that you might not have thought of. The first purpose is to build courage in the like-minded. When people see others are thinking like them, and they're passionate about it, they become more willing to speak after the protest. If you run a church right now and you want to see your people begin witnessing more openly, get them to take part in a protest. It's so uncomfortable. It will build the muscle. It will also allow them to see others who are brave, and courage is contagious. Second purpose of a protest, it makes your opponents nervous. Yes. And we really do want this. Yes, we love our opponents. I know that. We don't hate our enemies. But at the same time, we need to realize we are in a war for the gospel. We need to realize that. And if our side isn't winning, everybody's losing. So we know that those on the political left, the hardcore progressives, they actually are mentally fragile. And I'm not saying that in a derisive way. I'm saying it in a factual way. We know that the more you associate, the more that you hold, the more that you self-identify as a progressive, the greater your chance of mental illness. Because they don't have the hope of Christ. We don't realize that the people who are actually most mentally resilient, and this is a sociological fact, are the most committed Christians. And when you don't have that hope, it does come and affect you. So right now, here's a quick, 53% of of women who solidly identify, women between 18 and 34 who solidly identify as progressive, 52, 53%, maybe 54%, it's over half, they have been diagnosed with mental illness, depression, neurosis, for which they've had to receive treatment. So I'm saying, your opponent will be anxious about what you're doing. And that's a good thing because they overplay their hand. Because they begin to expose themselves for what they really are. And then the people who weren't involved in this particular issue suddenly say, what, this is what it's really all about? This is what they're really doing? This is really their attitude? They want to take my rights away as a parent? That's really what they want? So by making them nervous, you get them to expose themselves. And finally, third, this is the key purpose to a protest. I'm saying it's key among the three. It makes the general public take notice and listen. Because here's what's happening in our country. Most people actually don't watch the news. Most people don't actually know what's going on. And until something big happens, they didn't realize it was an issue at all. So a protest actually is like a fire that gathers the moths. They say, well, what's going on there? And so at that point, you want to respond. You want to respond with a clear message. I make a joke. I say, most people don't know what's going on in their country because they don't watch the news. And if they watch the CBC, they actually think the opposite is happening in their country.
Yeah, right.
So what we have with the protest is done right. It can make people who knew nothing about an issue pay attention and seek out answers. And to ensure success, you want to do a few things as well. You want to make sure that you have guaranteed numbers. So this is for the pastors. This is for the church leaders. If you're going to plan a protest, organize it, you want to make sure people are coming before you announce it to the larger world. Because if you have a protest and nobody comes, or it's a dozen people, that actually emboldens your opponents. So you've got to make sure that you are working together with like-minded churches, like-minded Christian leaders, so that you can get the numbers there. And then that mass will actually draw more people. It's like a magnet. But make sure that you've got the numbers. And then the next thing, you've got to control the message. Because you still want to make sure that you are attacking the policy. So whoever you are working with, you realize we can attack the idea. We can talk about why we don't like this. But you're not attacking the person or the party because that's going to get you into trouble. More about controlling the message. Know why you are opposing and know what you want to see happen in terms of change. And have those points filtered out to your entire group. So that if anyone is asked, here are the examples of what's wrong. So you could say, we know that children as young as 6 years old are being taught that boys and girls don't exist. And we know that that has caused trauma in children. We know that when parents have asked, stop teaching that, they've been told, you don't have a right to ask us to stop. We want parental rights. What do you want? We want parental rights. We just want you to stop talking about these things in public education. We want you to stick to math and science and English. That's what we want, because it's the rights of parents to train our children in their moral education. So you just simply put that out there. All right. So with that in mind, I'll give you another example. So here's what we did. Now keep in mind, the mainstream media want to paint you as a bigot. They do. So don't give them the paintbrush. Be very careful about what you say. Here's what they had to say when I spoke from the lectern at the protest. And I spoke using words that I knew were going to be able to resonate with the public, but wouldn't alienate anyone. So here's what happened. David Haskell, a professor at Wilfrid Laurier University, told the crowd that public educators are condemning diversity of belief. I've used their word against them. They're all about, well, we need to bring the LGBTQ agenda into our classes for diversity. I'm saying, you're against diversity. You're against diversity of belief. So I'm using their words. Parents guiding the cultural and moral development of their children is not controversial. It's natural. Yes. And any parent reading that in the newspaper would say, yeah, I can't disagree with that. What is unnatural is for the sacred right to be taken away by public educators who say their values are better than parents. So this is just simply an example of the kind of thing you can say, and it's going to be... Is this...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was me. I thought... You know, you never know. Maybe it's more important than what I'm doing here.
It's the media.
It's the media calling.
They're listening.
Now, do you ever do this? Sometimes I'll just say into my cell phone, "I'm only kidding, RCMP." All right, so I told you that I'd go in depth on what we can do in terms of a protest. I gave you the legal reasons why you can do it. Now I'm just going to go through some very quick examples of things that are smaller than a protest, but I'd encourage you to do. And again, right now we're on Plan A. Plan A is how do we insert the light of Christ into public education? And most of it is going to be political activism, so what can that look like? If you can't organize a big protest, what about a one-person protest? This is a very brave man. He's known anecdotally as Billboard Chris. Chris Ellison is his name, but he will go and stand out in front of boards of education, city halls. He dresses well, he speaks eloquently, he knows the issues, and one at a time he has conversations with people. And he says, do you know what's happening in classrooms across your country, your county, your city? And he just talks to people, and he wins them over one at a time. And that's been really, really successful. So don't discount the power of one. And if you're going to do something like this, make sure you videotape yourself. So now I'm going to talk to you as a professor of journalism as well. Right now, we are in this time in history when things can go viral. But they can't go viral if you don't record them. So if you're going to do your one-person protest, don't think you're just doing it for one person. You're actually doing it for 1 million if it goes viral. So if you're going to be bold enough and you're controlling the message and you are respectful, then put it online. And then let other influencers know. If you're doing it as part of your church, let your church know and say to them, can you please cast this out upon the waters? Because it may go viral. Tell the media that you're going to do it. Say, I'm going to stand out and I'm going to be having a one-person protest or a two-person protest. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a band. Give them something visual. I'm going to play my tuba in front and I'm going to have a sign, whatever it is. But if you can get the media involved, suddenly it becomes more interesting for other people. And as long as you've got the message, it can still work. I'm taking my own advice here. Not if I don't move on. Here we go. Is this one? There we go. I've done this myself. I've done this at my university. There have been times where my university has hosted a lecture that was completely at odds with factual evidence and completely at odds with what I would say the gospel is. And it has been at those times, well, I will run off the empirical evidence, which is being ignored, and I will stand out in front of the lecture hall, respectfully. On my sign it says, if you're only provided one side of the debate, it's indoctrination, not education. Do you wonder what else you're not being taught? Wow. And so, I've got my studies. I'm respectful. And as the students go in, I said, would you like to know the other side of the argument? You're about to hear XYZ from your professor. Here's the empirical evidence, not my opinion. Here's the empirical evidence that shows the other side. And all the students love it, right? They love it because they like that there's a little bit of controversy there. Yeah. And so, think of places where you could be, where you could stand, where there's an audience going in. Now, I know that this takes bravery, and it does. But we're at a spot in our culture where we need dramatic action.
Yes.
And so, these are things that you can do. But if this isn't your bag, what else could you do? What about t-shirts? I know it sounds a little bit ridiculous, but in fact, t-shirts now are walking billboards.
Yes.
Now, what about if your church organized everyone to wear a particular shirt that was not putting anyone down, but was proclaiming some gospel truth? They'll probably get in trouble if they're kids at your church and they go to school. We have examples of kids who got into trouble. Here's a young man who had a shirt that said there are only two genders. He was expelled for a bit. We have another fellow over here, life is wasted without Jesus. This was out in Nova Scotia. He was told you can't wear that. But even making the controversy is a good thing to get people to realize, here's what you can't say anymore. Why can't you say that anymore? That doesn't seem offensive. We want people to begin thinking. So a t-shirt might be exactly what you want to do. How do you make it bigger? Get your church to do it. Nice. Similarly, what about bumper stickers? Excuse me, bumper stickers, flags. We're about to come into the month of June when a lot of flags, gay pride flags will be flying. That's right. What if we just flew a Christian flag? This is the old Sunday school flag. It was developed, I think, after the 1940s by a Methodist minister. It's called the Sunday school flag. That's my yard right there, flying the Sunday school flag for the month of June. So that people will ask me, what's that flag? It's because I love Jesus. Nice. It's because I want to proclaim the goodness of God. So we have things that we can do that make things more normative. Let me put it this way. So let me put on the hat of a social scientist. Human beings are pattern recognizing machines. We recognize patterns. So if we see over the course of our lifetime 10 fingers, 10 fingers, 10 fingers, we begin to think that 10 fingers are normative. So whatever you see repeatedly becomes normative. So does the LGBT ubiquity from flags to crosswalks to stickers, does it begin to make more sense when you realize that normative behavior comes from repetition? So we need to make our side more repetitive, more normative. Nice. Just something you can do. This gets a little bit more complicated. I've given you some easy. This one's a bit more difficult. Every delegation for a school board is open to members of the public. If you are a taxpayer within the particular region, you are able to be a delegate. We need to start doing this. And when you are going to be a delegate, tell the media that you're going to be speaking. Also, videotape it yourself so that you can put it up and then get it shared, provided that you did a good job, by the members of your church. This is me. I was delegating. It had just become known in our school board that they were promoting this notion that was very discriminatory against white students. It was about, they were saying that if you are a white student, you are an oppressor. Regardless of what your attitude was, regardless of what your heart was, whites are oppressors. And then the opposite side, people of color are just perpetual victims. They don't have agency. It was this very toxic notion. And so I delegated and I said, I'm going to give you the research on what you're teaching. First of all, I'm going to show that it doesn't do anything good, but it actually has been shown to increase bigotry, increase hostility, and it caused division in your school system. Now, I'd like to tell you that it did any good. The trustees, the majority of them didn't listen. Nothing happened. But the community began to question, what's being taught to my kid? So use the delegation. And this also applies to your delegations of your municipal council. If they're doing something that you know is against the gospel, it's an obligation, or it's your obligation to speak out. If you're tech savvy, creating a website is something that you can do. And now, remember, you're saying, well, I'm a member of a church. I don't know if I can do this. If it's about the issue, yes, you can. And sometimes your website might be the only factual source on something. So that's an option for you as well. During the trustee campaign you realize there were municipal elections in 2023, there were some people who created websites that said, here's actually what's being taught in your schools. They were so well viewed that the opponents began to say, we got to get them taken down. They started calling the press, these are bigoted. They weren't bigoted, they were factual. But I'm saying that many parents for the first time learned what was going on because of websites during the trustee elections of 2023.
Excuse me, David.
Yes.
Since you changed the slide. Okay, does anybody have a birthday in January?
I mean, me.
Okay, what day?
23rd.
What day?
21st.
31.
23rd? 21st? You just got one.
Hooray! Look at free gifts. Free gifts, okay. Who knows? I think next time they're coming in with a car. So I will definitely stop. So we're at the end of part one, by the way. I was going to say you can also write public letters, but I want to get to, so I'm telling you, you're going to get in trouble. This is evidence. I now have a fan club at my university. They are called WLU Changes Do. They are dedicated to my firing. So, and praise God, because at this time in our history, in our culture, if you are not getting some heat, you probably are not spreading much light. So ask yourself, how much heat are you experiencing? And then ask yourself how much light you're spreading. All right, getting to, that was the end of part one. I always like to let people know where we are. What are we for time? Am I almost at the end of time?
5 after.
When do I have to be done at 15:15, don't I?
We've got a little flexibility.
John says a little.
We've got free time between now and when our board meeting, when our sisters meeting starts at 3 o'clock. So
All right.
we're a little
I'm taking off the
flexible.
jacket. That means I'm going fast. Right? Okay, here we go. Okay, all right. So that was the end of part one.
You need your microphone.
For heaven's sake, thank you. Could you imagine? Oh, I would not have been popular. Okay, so I want to summarize what I've just been telling you related to Plan A. Plan A is that we begin to do more political activism. I've tried to give you some ways that that can happen. But I'll be honest with you, there are many experts who say that currently the education system, the public education system, is too far gone.
Yes.
And that right now it is not a safe place for Christian children.
Yes.
And there's some really good evidence that that is the case. I'll quickly mention some of the evidence. Some of the evidence shows that kids who attend public education, who are from Christian homes, but attend public education, they have a 60 to 70% chance of leaving the faith.
Yes.
Right? And we shouldn't be surprised. If you are sending your child off to Caesar, do not be surprised when they come home Romans.
Right.
Right?
Good one.
That's actually not mine. That's I give credit where credit's due. Vodi Bakum used that one, but it's true. So what I want to talk about now, and this is a challenge for you as a Christian leader, and I don't know what resources you have, but I would. This is me telling you that right now people are actually abandoning the public schools. So in Canada, since the pandemic, there has been a 103% increase in homeschooling.
Amen.
And it's not falling off. It's still growing. In the United States, since the pandemic, there's been a 50%. Why is it not as great in the United States? Because there were already a significant number who were homeschooling. So Canada is catching up a little bit. In terms of growth of independent schools, 7% increase in independent schools. Again, it's because it's a bit more expensive, but still, across the board, that's pretty significant. So what I want to talk to you about is, do you have the ability as a Christian leader to either facilitate a school in your church, if you have one, or to organize parents into some kind of educational pod or collective? Because there has never been a better time to try and start an alternative to public education. People are hungry for it. The reason this could be so immensely impactful is that even people who are not followers of Christ will be interested. They are begging for some alternative. And if you can give them an option, they'll say, you might not have noticed, but right now Christianity is just beginning to be cool again.
Yes.
People are recognizing that without the gospel, society falls apart. You have people like Richard Dawkins. He was the head of the New Atheists. In just the last month, he said, actually, I realize that we need to be a Christian culture.
Yes. Yeah.
It's funny because these are people who really love apple pie, but they hate orchards. But more people are faith-friendly because they see what happens when society abandons Jesus.
Amen.
And they realize there's something to this.
Yep.
So, let's get back to what could be. You could open a school in your church. And you could have parents who are non-church goers say, please take my kids. You could be part of a collective of parents, or you could be organizing a collective for parents. See, they don't know, a lot of these parents, they want to do it, but they don't know how to do it. Yes. But maybe you already have connections in terms of curriculum. Maybe you know some parents who are already doing homeschooling. And all you need to do is become the franchise, or that you become the head of the franchise. You say, I'm going to find the curriculum for you. I'm going to show you how to organize it. And then you release it into the community. I'll give you some other stats to encourage you. You say, but I won't be good. I won't do as well. Nonsense. I'm going to tell you that. Show you a few more slides. I'm mindful of the time. Okay. Here's what's been happening in public education in Ontario. So we know from the data of our own government that year over year we have decreases in knowledge related to science, reading, and math. Now there's another group that is called PISA. It's the Program for International Students Assessment that has been looking at, for 20 years now, the knowledge of 15-year-olds and then what they are at graduation. And they've done this for Ontario. And in every measure, they've gone down. In fact, it's been a 30-point drop in reading, a 35-point drop in mathematics, and about a 20-point drop in science. What I'm saying is, you really can't do worse. Seriously, you cannot do worse than public education. But here's something else to be encouraged about. We know from the data that Christian schools actually have better outcomes.
Yes.
So Cardis think tank out of Hamilton has collected much of this data. And what they've shown is that students attending homegrown independent Christian schools that align with the faith and values of their family, so it's not conflicting. Like if let's say it was a conservative Catholic school, but you were Pentecostal, it doesn't work as well. So you want to have some kind of alignment faith-wise, but when there is that alignment and it's a Christian school, they academically outperform their public school peers by a sizable margin. And that's homegrown. These are not elite. These are not elite schools. And why is it? Because there tends to be a greater diligence among the teachers and a greater diligence among the students because Jesus makes a difference.
Amen.
But it's not just academics. Oh, sorry, one last thing for my last slide. This is what happens when you rush the professor. It's also in terms of their social attitudes. Kids who have attended a Christian school, homegrown Christian school, also show more benevolence and altruism than public school kids. And what does that look like? Well, they volunteer the congregations, but they also volunteer in those spots in society that we would deem to be for the socially vulnerable. So they tend to be more involved in soup kitchens. They're more involved in cleanup crews, downtown ministries. So kids not only benefit academically from a Christian institute, high school, public school, or high school or elementary school, but they also are socially better off. Now back to homeschooling. Homeschooling outcomes are better than public school outcomes. So public education, we think, but the professional teachers Don't they do better? No. In fact, we have lots of data, and if we had a little bit more time, I'd actually start quoting from the studies, but I'm trying to just rush ahead. We have lots of data that shows that even a mom and a dad who does not have a university degree or college degree actually, on average, has better outcomes than the public school system.
Yes.
And they can accomplish the education in fewer hours, which often allows for time for the kids, if it's of their interest, for them to begin basic trade qualifications. They can begin to learn home economic stuff that actually has a lot of practical value because they can have the reduced hours that school requires. Okay. I think what I want to get to then is the last slide. Okay. So we've got a plan A and a plan B. The plan A is that you're going to become more politically active. You realize that becoming politically active will not be popular, but it's necessary. The reason we want to do it is maybe our kids aren't in the public school system, but other people's kids are. And we love them. And we want to do something to protect them. So we have to speak out.
Yes.
But we also realize that right now, public school is a dangerous place for Christian kids. And so we need to start looking for alternatives, and we might have to create them ourselves. And the way that I would put this is that if we want to spread the light of Christ into education, we need to be building more lighthouses. All right, thanks everybody. So, do we have time? John, do we have time for a few questions?
Yeah, I think with, 10 minutes for question and answer?
Okay. And I apologize, folks. We lost about, I actually was to the letter, like I had the numbers, but we lost a little time. Yes, Judy.
The one tape that screen that you skipped over was about the social. I hear that so many times that if you homeschool your kids, they're not socially adapted to.
Yeah, I'll address that.
Yeah.
So we've got really good evidence from meta-analyses of kids who have been homeschooled versus public school, and it is actually the opposite, that the homeschool kids are better socialized. They're politer, more socially responsible, and anecdotally I can say also, as a university professor, the kids that I have in my class, I can tell if they've been homeschooled because they are the most mannerly, they are the most diligent, and usually, not always, but usually the most academically prepared.
Amen. They complain though that they don't know how to act in the world.
That is just nonsense. They do know how to act because they are social. They still go down the street and they play hide and seek with their friends. They still participate in probably intramural sports. There are all these opportunities. It is completely at odds with the historical record that we are now taking kids away from their parents, putting them in with a bunch of other kids and saying, figure it out, right? We're asking these young people to tune themselves to someone else who's already out of tune, right? That just doesn't make sense. Like, you need to hear where middle C is, and then you tune yourself to middle C. So the big middle C is Jesus, and then that should be embodied in their parents. Yes?
I have a couple. One, how do you respond to people or churches who say, oh, we're just going to stick to Jesus and the gospel. We don't really want to be political. How do you personally respond to them?
Well, yeah, I have 5 minutes. Here's how I would respond to them. I'd say, you better read your Bible. But let me dig into it a little bit more. We have the Great Commission at the end of Matthew where Jesus says, I want you, therefore, because all authority has been given to me, therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, teaching them, right? So, laws of the land are the way that most people learn what is right and wrong. And Christians, since Jesus, till about 60 years ago, realized that we actually do need to have the Christian influence in our laws. And now you can say, well, I don't want to live in a theocracy, neither do I. But what you do want are laws that are morally informed by the light of Christ. Because when that does happen, you have societal flourishing. How do I know that? Because immigration goes one way. People want to come to those places that have been blessed by the gospel. So back to this idea, they might quote Romans 13, where Paul says that you need to submit to the authorities and therefore God has ordained them. And I'm saying, yeah, but at the same time, Paul says that they should be doing good, that the evil should fear them. Right now, it's the exact opposite. We actually are in a situation where evil is being called good. And so we know that that's not what Paul intended, right? Again, I go back to the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come. How does that happen if the laws don't change? Yes.
The Lord expects us to submit only when the authorities above us are living according to scriptural values.
And I think you've got some, so we're going to get real theological here, but super short. I think you're right, because we look in places like Ephesians where Paul says that wives should submit to husbands. But we would never say if a husband is beating the wife, that the wife should, like we realize it is not categorical. We do. So, but we don't apply that sometimes to our political leaders, but we should. So
You can't submit to someone like Hitler when he's
exactly. So we know this. We just have to put our hypotheticals on. Okay.
Another one, but if someone else wants to.
Let's just make sure. Okay. Any other questions? Yep.
Quick one, because right on time. Most of us in the room have heard this for the first time or been engaged, have not engaged. So we're like deer in the headlights. Is there like 3 points of practical ways that we can get politically involved in our community and our church right now? 3 steps, 3 little formulas, any ideas?
Well, I think that you need to do something. And I'd say if you're going to do something, organize some kind of march or protest. And why I say that is if you can do that big thing, then anything else will seem really easy. And right now, it's pretty lonely for the rest of us activists. When we are petitioning our churches, like locally, I will send out to the 30 biggest churches and I don't get responses. And so I think that what we would really love to see is leadership from the leaders.
Right.
And then we'll join you. You know, you let me know you're doing something. I'll bring the 100 or 300 or 400 who are already lay people in this space. So that would be one of the main things.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
How do we stop our government from using our tax dollars to put in these gay flags? Right now, the government...
I'm going to stop you there because I don't know. No. But I would say, I mean, we all know we need to, and it's going to be, we need to change the culture in the ground because more people need to know who Jesus is. But we also have to not hide our light under a bushel, and we need to become politically active, because if we don't, and it's tough, people aren't going to like us, but...
Because there's Christians in the government who have to give an accountability.
They do.
And they also are forced to do this stuff, like right now.
No one is forced, right?
They're they can lose their job.
And they should lose their job. I mean, I'm sorry, but I mean, people used to lose their life, right? That's what martyrs did. And now, I mean, I can just picture Satan laughing. He's in hell and he said, all I had to do was threaten their job and they completely caved.
Exactly.
It's like, remember when we used to have to throw them to the lions? Not anymore.
Just lose your pension.
I mean, honestly, it's either you are going to suffer or your children are going to suffer. So that's it. I mean, we have to come to that. So
This lady here has,
okay.
In order to be effective, let's say in a protest, like I do not feel qualified with answers.
Right.
Like what are some good places to get truth about like the facts of things?
It would depend on the issue, but there are really good resources out there. I can't go through all of them right now because it would depend on the issue. Like I'm not sure what issue we're talking about, but if you sent me an email and you said this is my issue, then I could refer you in that area, right? But one thing that I would do, just type in your words and then type in something like Christian apologetics on it. That might be a good start. Oh, or talk to Ann Gillies.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
A rock card. A
Yeah,
rock card on
perfect.
Tinder.
Actually, yes, let's use our resources.
Yes.
Ann, thank you. She's kind of the go-to person. What would I do? I'd talk to Ann Gillies. Okay. Okay, I think we really have to wrap this up. You're good for now? Okay,
Well,
thanks everybody.
It ties into losing your job. I was going to ask how you maintain. It sounds like people are out to have your head there at
Yep.
Wilford Laurie. Do you maintain your position there by just simply knowing or being willing that you could lose it? Like, or how do you deal with your coworkers and the
Peer pressure.
Is it a nasty environment for you all the time?
Yep. But I have 2 or 3 Christian brothers and sisters in the Lord, and you know, that's my umbrella against the deluge.
That's good.
David, thank you. Now, on a little good note, City of Brampton 5 years ago, the city made a proclamation that December was Christian Heritage Month.
Nice.
And so every December, the Christian flag is flown in the city of Brampton.
That's good.
Wow.
So,
That's amazing.
again, strides can be made forward. Prayer and, you know, talk about the issues. In our church, I know peers wanting to come to our church, all of it. Of course, I can't endorse, but I can simply say who the person is. You know, so there is ways around it. But, you know, don't let them speak, but just acknowledge them, and they do whatever they do after that. Because like a church our size, with all kinds of political backgrounds in it, you do have to be cautious. But there's still ways of trying to gently move people around, you know. But always remember one thing, whether it's our school, university, whatever, God's still in control.
Amen.
On the throne.
God's still on the throne, we have to look to Him and trust. And there's no doubt, I know, like I deal with some of our young adults, and they're going through an awful time in college and universities, especially with the professors, because they get downgraded. And
They do.
They know that, and it's sad. But thankfully, they are standing up, and they are questioning. And I think it's always good to question. The more we question, I think the better off we are, because they know that we're just not going to accept everything that they're saying. You know? And God is our helper. Amen?
Amen.
He really is. But again, David, thanks.
It's a pleasure, yeah.
Insightful and